The auction room was too quiet for a place where starships were being sold like used shoes. Rows of flickering screens hummed gently with lists of decommissioned vessels, each tagged with cryptic codes, faded pictures, and digital scars from old wars or forgotten missions. Bidders came and went with quiet focus, speaking in low voices, tapping in credits, exchanging tight nods with brokers who didn't ask questions. Jonah Meric wasn't supposed to be here, Hal. He could barely afford his rent on Earth's backwater coast, but something in him, something small and burning, had pulled him into this gravity-dampened auction hall floating above the Martian ship graveyard. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was that strange itch every human knows, the ache to start over, to rebuild from the wreckage. That's when he saw Unit 12807, an old, smooth-bodied courier-class vessel with no logs, no crew data, and just one strange note: autonomous life support systems intact, organic signature detected. That should have scared him. Should have stopped him. But instead, it felt like fate had brushed its fingers down his spine. He placed the minimum bid, just 1 credit above the scrap rate. No one else bid. The system chimed, sterile and hollow. Vessel acquired. He signed off with his trembling finger, pretending he hadn't just bought something that could house a parasite, a dead body, or worse. He'd expected a broken ship, a leaking air filter, maybe some old AI logs. What he didn't expect was the breathing. It was faint, slow, and rhythmic. When he stepped onto the docking ramp, the door opened without a word. Lights flickered. On inside, the ship smelled faintly of starlight and something floral, like wind in a field that no longer existed. There, curled in what once was a cargo stasis pod, was a figure, a woman or something shaped like one. Her skin shimmered faintly, pale lavender threaded with veins of silver that pulsed like music. Her hair floated around her head in slow motion, alive in the artificial gravity, a cascade of soft tendrils shifting like kelp in water. She was unconscious. No, not quite. Her eyes were closed, but her lips moved. Whispering? Dreaming? Praying? Jonah froze. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a soldier. He was just a man who'd once watched his sister die because the Earth hospitals were too full and the spaceports too expensive. He didn't believe in angels or ghosts, but something about this being made his chest ache. There were no alarms. No signs of infection or warning tags. The ship was still, watching him, almost as if it waited to see what he'd do. He took a cautious step closer. The pod's display lit up alien script scrolled across the screen, translating slowly. Lira, biostatus, stabilizing, human contact detected, synchronizing. He knelt beside her, hand trembling, trying to decipher what he'd just inherited. She was beautiful in a way that wasn't about shape or species. Her presence was calming, magnetic like the quiet before a summer storm. He reached out gently, and the moment his fingers brushed the side of the stasis pod, her eyes opened. They glowed soft silver irises with no pupils, wide and confused, staring right into his soul. Neither spoke. The silence was full, not empty, dense with something ancient and raw. He should have backed away. He should have called security. But he didn't. Something about her gaze haunted, wary, and exhausted held him still. She looked not like a predator, but a survivor. Not like a queen, but a prisoner. Her voice broke the silence, cracked and melodic. Please don't send me back. Jonah blinked, stunned. Back where? Her body trembled. To the ones who built the cage. It wasn't the answer he expected. He had just bought a ship, not a soul. But now she looked at him like he was the first kindness she'd seen in 100 lifetimes. The lights around them dimmed as if the ship itself exhaled. Somewhere deep inside, he felt a shift, like the moment before his story really begins. This wasn't salvage. This wasn't a deal. It was a rescue, one he never knew he'd signed up for. And even though every part of his brain told him to report it, to walk away, to let someone with training handle this, Jonah just nodded, slowly, heart pounding. You're safe here, he whispered. Her eyes fluttered. And for a second, just a second, he thought he saw tears. Asterisk, asterisk, the ship felt warmer now. Like it had drawn breath when Jonah made that promise. As if it were more than metal and wire something watching, weighing his words. He stayed kneeling beside the strange woman, her name echoing in his mind, Lira. It rang like an old song remembered from a dream, beautiful and incomplete. She stared at him with those silvery eyes, unmoving but alert, like a deer ready to bolt. Jonah had no idea what she'd gone through, no clue what she was. But she looked like someone who had waited a very long time for a simple act of decency. Still, his body was stiff with unease. He knew enough about the universe to understand danger didn't always come with fangs and guns. Sometimes it came in the form of a whisper from something lost, something desperate. He rose slowly, giving her space. "You're awake," he said, unsure of what else to offer. The words sounded clumsy in his mouth. She blinked, then sat up with surprising grace, legs folded beneath her. Her movements were fluid, measured. She looked around the dim ship interior as though seeing it for the first time. Then her gaze settled back on him. "You are the one who answered the signal," she said, and her voice was layered gentle but worn thin, like silk soaked in old rain. "You chose this vessel?" "I didn't know anyone was inside," he replied, trying not to sound defensive. "I thought I was buying a junker." She tilted her head, thoughtful. "Yet you did not run." Jonah's throat tightened. "You asked for help." That seemed to confuse her more than reassure. She touched her temple, fingertips glowing faintly against her skin, as if searching for an answer buried under grief. "There were others before you. Soldiers, scavengers. One tried to wake me forcefully. The ship defended me. It is bound to me." Jonah stepped back slightly, a flicker of unease crawling along his neck. "Is the ship alive?" "Not as you understand life," she murmured, "but it knows me. It remembers kindness and fear." "It's older than your moon colonies." His mind reeled. This wasn't just an alien, this was technology and history. Humanity hadn't even scratched yet. "How long were you in stasis?" She looked down. "I don't know. Time moves differently when you're waiting for rescue or death." The air between them thickened. Jonah rubbed the back of his neck, trying to shake the chill that had crept into his bones. He looked around the ship. "There's no records. No logs. The seller didn't even know your name." "It erased them," she said quietly, "for my safety. If they found me—" She stopped, as if the weight of her past pressed too heavily on her throat. He waited, giving her the silence she seemed to need. Finally, she looked back at him. "Why did you bid? You could have walked away." Jonah thought of his sister again, Emily, her smile still burned into his memory, her laugh echoing through years of silence. The way her fingers clutched his in that final hospital hour. He swallowed hard, "Because I wanted to fly again. Not on someone's payroll, not hauling corporate junk. Just go, find something new, find me again." Lyra's eyes shimmered, reflecting a kind of sorrow he hadn't expected. "You lost someone?" He nodded. "Yeah, years ago. But the hole's still there." She touched her chest lightly. "Loss is the one language that speaks across stars." Those words hit him like a slow punch to the gut. He took a shaky breath. "Are you in danger? Are people looking for you?" She hesitated. "Yes, not all who wear uniforms bring justice. Some bring chains." Jonah clenched his fists. "If they come here to take you, what happens to me? The ship won't let them take me while I'm awake. But if they disable it, or me—" He looked at her, really looked at the quiet strength behind her voice, the way she was bracing for betrayal that hadn't yet come. It wasn't fear in her eyes, it was weariness, like someone who'd run too far for too long. "You don't trust me yet," he said. "No," she said softly. "But I want to." That admission surprised him. In her place, he wouldn't have trusted anyone. She had nothing, no power, no planet, no protections. And yet she sat there on a ship barely functional, trying to find safety in a stranger's mercy. Jonah exhaled, the decision forming quietly inside him. "All right, Lira, I'll help. We'll figure it out together. No one's putting you in a cage again." She didn't thank him. Instead, she stood, wavering slightly, and held out her hand, not a gesture of weakness, but one of mutual pact. He took it, and her fingers were warm, trembling, and impossibly real. In that single touch, he understood what no scan or file could tell him. She wasn't just a passenger. She was a person, and now she wasn't alone. The ship had begun to stir in subtle, almost imperceptible ways, like an animal waking from long sleep. Lights adjusted softly to their presence, doors opened before they reached them, and a low hum vibrated beneath their feet as if the vessel itself was growing curious about its new captain, or perhaps just grateful. Jonah spent the next few hours learning the layout, watching Lira out of the corner of his eye as she moved through the corridors like she'd once belonged here, but was now unsure if she still did. She traced her fingers over the walls like one might touch the bark of a tree they'd carved initials into as children. There was sadness in the way she moved. Not the kind born of despair, but the heavy kind, the kind made from years of loneliness. Piled one on top of the other until you forgot what warmth felt like. He found her later, standing silently in the ship's observation bay, a narrow, windowed alcove that looked out into the empty stretch of space between Mars and the outer mining rings. The stars were distant, barely more than pinpricks of cold light. She stood still, her face bathed in the soft glow, her reflection flickering in the glass like a ghost trying to remember who it once was. Jonah joined her without a word. Silence, he'd learned, was a kind of comfort with her. She didn't flinch when he stepped close. That was something. A step? My people used to believe stars were the spirits of the fallen, she said, not turning. Each one a soul that had given up its body but not its light. Jonah crossed his arms, leaning on the railing. We used to think stars were gods. Then we learned they were just burning balls of gas. Took some of the magic out of it. She glanced at him, a soft smirk tugging at her lips. Or maybe your kind just needed different gods. He chuckled, surprised at the levity. Maybe. Ours didn't answer when we needed them most. They fell quiet again, but it wasn't empty. It was full of a fragile understanding beginning to knit itself between them. A quiet thread pulled tight by empathy, not obligation. Do you have family? He asked finally. Her expression darkened. I had a bondmate, a child. Jonah's heart stopped. Had? Lira nodded, slowly. Taken from me. When the war began, they called it a war, but it was a cleansing. My world resisted being absorbed. We wanted to remain sovereign, untouched by the alliance. They didn't agree. We were made examples of. My family was on the first list. He looked away, not out of disinterest, but to hide the tears burning behind his eyes. He didn't want her to see how much her pain echoed his own. She hadn't just lost people, she'd lost a future. He thought of his sister again, how the cancer ate her away, how he'd held her hand as if he could anchor her to life just a little longer. He hadn't saved her. And now, here was another life slipping through the universe, untethered and drifting. He wouldn't fail again. I'm sorry, he said quietly. She tilted her head. Why? You didn't do it. Because you deserve better. Because nobody deserves to carry that alone. Lira studied him as if trying to decide whether to believe. His compassion. Finally, she said, You were strange, Jonah Meric. Yeah, I get that a lot. No, she continued, a touch more serious now. I mean, you're kind. I was taught humans were brutal, chaotic, self-absorbed. But I've only seen you hurt and still reaching out. Jonah shrugged. We are brutal and chaotic. But when we care when we really care, there's nothing we won't do to protect someone. Lira turned toward him slowly. Even if it means losing everything, his voice dropped to a whisper. Especially then. She stared at him for a long moment. Then, carefully, as if scared she might break something precious, she stepped forward. Not to embrace him, not to fall into his arms like the endings of old romantic tales, but to stand beside him, shoulder to shoulder. Close enough that he could feel the warmth of her skin, the subtle tremble in her breath. It was not love. Not yet, but it was something more sacred recognition. The meeting of two lost souls who had decided, if only for now, that they wouldn't drift alone anymore. I don't know how to trust again, she said, voice low, soft. You don't have. Tio, he replied. Just walk with me. We'll figure it out. And in that moment, two survivors stared into the same stretch of endless stars. Not as aliens, not as refugee and rescuer, but as people trying, against all odds, to believe in something better than what they'd known. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It began with a flicker. Sudden dimming of the lights, so subtle Jonah almost missed it. He was in the engine bay, elbow deep in a cluster of cooling coils and fusion regulators, sweat streaking his brow. The ship's systems were alien in origin, no doubt about it, that they'd grown strangely responsive to his presence. Panels that should have needed clearance codes open for him. The interface had adapted, reshaping itself into crude Terran glyphs he could barely decipher. It was like the vessel wanted to be understood. But when the lights blinked again, just once, like the closing of an eye, he froze. Then came the voice, unauthorized signal detected. The ship whispered, the same gentle voice that usually welcomed him aboard, but now there was a hard edge to it. Subspace ping intercepted, coordinates traced. Proximity alert 2 days, 6 hours. Jonah's stomach dropped. He backed away from the console. Lira? He called out, his voice shaky, echoing against metal and silence. She was already walking toward him by the time he reached the main corridor. Her face was paler than before, and her jaw clenched tight. You heard it too, she said. Nodded. Someone found us. Lira glanced over her shoulder. The Alliance patrols monitor these frequencies. Even while dormant, the ship's systems may have leaked data, or someone watching the auction marked this vessel for reclamation. They've been looking for me? Jonah felt something twist inside him. How long do we have? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The air was already heavy with the answer, not long enough. They sat in the control deck together, watching the holographic display as it drew a slow red arc across the stars and intercept course. The ship had already calculated it with terrifying precision. The vessel was Alliance-built, or at least retrofitted with their tech. Lira identified it as a Hunter-class corvette, fast, agile, made for boarding and retrieval missions. And once it reached them, there would be no negotiations. No mercy, just protocol. Jonah stared at the map, trying to process it all. You didn't just escape from prison, did you? He asked quietly. No, she said, just as soft. I escaped from erasure. She rose and began pacing, arms wrapped around herself. I was a diplomat's bondmate. Not military, not a threat. But when they began invading outer systems, the Alliance didn't want voices of unity, only obedience. My bondmate spoke out. He begged for restraint. He believed in dialogue. She paused, her voice trembling. They murdered him, silently. Off the record. Then they came for me and my daughter. My child, she had abilities. Sensitivity to frequencies, energy gifts we still don't understand. The Alliance saw it as a threat. I hid her. I never saw her again. Jonah's heart broke in his chest, piece by piece. You think they found her? I don't know, she said, her voice barely audible. But they didn't kill me. They experimented. Neural resonance mapping, genetic testing. They wanted to know if my biology could be replicated or controlled. He stared at her. You were a prisoner. She nodded. Until the ship found me. He looked at the ceiling. You keep saying the ship. What is this thing really? Lira moved to the control panel and laid her palm flat against it. Lights flared around her fingers. This is an arc vessel, she said. A relic. From before my time. Before the first Great Wars. They called them the living ships, built with organic and artificial synthesis. Bound to their pilots through emotion, not programming. This ship chose to protect me. It killed to get me out. It bonded with me to hide what I carried. Jonah blinked. What you carried? She turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. My daughter's genetic sequence. Her memory map. Her conscious imprint. The ship preserved it. She's not alive, but she isn't gone either. He stumbled back a step, shaking his head. You mean she's in the ship? In a way, Lira whispered. The ship houses fragments of her consciousness, emotions, dreams, the things they couldn't extract from me. I buried them deep. Kept her alive as code impulse, hidden in memory banks even I can't access. Until now. Jonah suddenly felt very small, like a child learning the moon was not made of light but stone. And now the Alliance is coming to take her. She met his gaze with something between defiance and despair. They don't want justice. They want silence. If they recover this ship, they'll wipe everything. My child's echo gone forever. The weight of it hit him like gravity doubled. He thought he'd just stumbled into something larger than himself, but this wasn't just big. It was sacred. A mother running from an empire. A daughter's soul embedded in steel and fire. And now, he was no longer a bystander. He was the only barrier between extinction and remembrance. What do we do? He asked. Lyra's voice was steady but hollow. We run. Or we bury the ship in a system they can't trace. But we'll lose her. Either way, the Alliance wins. No, Jonah said, his jaw hardening. They don't. Not while I'm breathing. And for the first time, she looked at him not like a stranger, not like a rescuer, but like a man who might just be brave enough to carry a galaxy's worth of grief and still keep walking. The ship had never felt smaller. Every corridor, every flickering console, every pulse of the living walls seemed to press in closer, as if the vessel itself knew that time was slipping away. Outside, space stretched silent and infinite, but Jonah could feel the invisible hands of fate tightening their grip. He stood at the helm, fingers wrapped around the edge of the console, as if it might anchor him against the storm coming their way. On the display, the Alliance corvette drew nearer, crawling like a spider across a web spun through black stars. 2 days had become one. Now they had less than 15 hours. It wasn't enough. Lira had stopped speaking much. She moved like a woman, underwater deliberate, weighted by something she hadn't yet told him. Jonah watched her from the shadows of the bridge as she stood with her palm pressed against the mainframe, eyes closed, whispering words in a language he didn't understand. He could see the light moving beneath her skin now, threads of bioluminescence, pulsing with quiet grief. It wasn't just the stress. It was something deeper, something unraveling. He stepped closer, not to interrupt, but simply to be near. She opened her eyes slowly. She's slipping, she said. The ship is struggling to hold her presence. It was never meant to contain a consciousness for this long. Jonah swallowed the knot in his throat. Is there anything we can do? Lira shook her head. Not unless we find a transfer vessel or a host system compatible with her neural matrix, which doesn't exist in human tech. He leaned on the console beside her, exhaling hard. So we're going to lose her, either to time or to them? She's all I have left, Lira said. Her voice didn't break. It bent like steel and fire. Jonah's jaw tightened. He couldn't watch this woman, this fierce, quiet survivor, lose her child again. And not while he still had breath in his lungs. Then we don't run, he said. We fight. Lira turned to him, startled. You've seen the data. That ship will tear us apart. He nodded. Yeah, if we meet it head on, but what if we don't? What if we don't give them a straight fight? Her brow furrowed. You have a plan? Not yet, he admitted, but I have desperation. And I have you. And this ship that seems to love you like a mother loves a child. Her expression shifted, softening. You're serious. I didn't come this far to let you lose everything again. She looked down at the floor, then back at him. There's a system Tal Vila. Ancient ringed gas giant. Ion storms constantly rage across it. Enough interference to jam scans, distort signals. If we reach it before they do, we could hide long enough to attempt something. Something like transferring her consciousness. Or sealing the ship with her permanently inside, she whispered, to keep her safe. Even if it means I never see her again. Jonah's stomach twisted. Lira, she's not alive in the way you are, Lira said gently, but she dreams. She feels. And if they take her, she dies for real. Erased. Jonah slammed his hand against the panel, frustration burning like acid in his throat. There's got to be another way. She reached out, her hand finding his. Her fingers were so light, so warm. Jonah, this is the way. The quiet truth in her voice shattered something inside him. The kind of grief that came not from death, but from choices damned either way. He stared at her, then nodded once, tightly. Then we get her to Tal Vila. We use every second we have. He rushed to the command deck, started rerouting the ship's auxiliary systems to boost the engines. The vessel groaned in response, but obeyed. Lira began feeding coordinates into the navigation array, while whispering to the walls like she was begging the ship itself to give one last miracle. And somewhere deep in the core, Jonah swore he felt something pulse back an answer, faint but steady dot as the ship broke into faster than light. The stars around them blurred into streaks of brilliant white, and Jonah allowed himself one moment of hope, small and trembling, but alive, but it didn't last long. Hours later, just as they emerged from FTL near the outer rim of the Tal Vila system, the alarm screamed. The Hunter-class corvette had arrived early. Jonah stared at the blinking red light on the sensor feed, disbelief sinking in like ice. How the hell are they already here? They must have jumped ahead using priority clearance corridors, Lira said, her voice flat. They want us that badly? Jonah slammed his fist against the helm. They're going to intercept before we even reach the storm front. She looked at him, then really looked. Her eyes, shimmering with silver light, weren't afraid. They were resolved. Then I go. No, he growled. Don't even say it. I bored them. They think I'm the prize. They'll take me and leave. You take the ship. You protect her. It's the only way. Jonah stood there, shaking his head, his chest filling with fury. No, I don't trade you for her. That's not what this is. Tears welled in Lyra's eyes, now real ones, finally breaking through. I've already died once, Jonah. I won't let her die for me again. He grabbed her shoulders, held her firmly. I'm not letting either of you go. Not without a fight. And just like that, the path ahead was clear, not safe, not guaranteed. But clear. They would not surrender. Not Lira. Not her daughter. Humanity. Asterisk, asterisk, the ship screamed through the edge of the Tal Vila system, its hull groaning as it dipped toward the swirling chaos of the planet's ion storm. Outside, the gas giant loomed like a vengeful god, its clouds crackling with electric fury, gold and red storms colliding in silence across the horizon. Jonah had never seen anything so beautiful or so terrifying. Behind them, the Alliance corvette held its course with cold precision, relentless, unshaken, a weapon of bureaucracy and blood. It didn't need to speak. It came to reclaim what it believed was its property. Lira, the ship. A faint echo of a little girl's soul encoded in silence. And it would not stop. The Ark ship jolted as another warning blared missile lock detected. Defensive systems spooled to life, ancient weaponry humming from ports long sealed. Jonah felt the floor shudder beneath him, the console lights growing warmer, brighter, more alive. The ship was waking up in ways he hadn't seen before, like it remembered war and decided to give it one last answer. He saw Lira across the deck, standing with her eyes closed, hands outstretched, murmuring to the vessel like she was coaxing it back from the grave. She wasn't just the pilot, she was part of it. Its voice, its pain. Its anchor, the first missile, struck the outer shielding. The impact rippled across the hull but didn't pierce. Not yet. Jonah pulled himself into the co-pilot chair, instinct taking over. What do we have? He barked. Lira didn't look at him. Limited pulse cannons. Some kind of plasma rail buried in the underframe. Defense drones not fully active, but the ship's reacting to our will. To fear, to love. Jonah stared at her, amazed. You're saying we have to feel it into fighting? Yes, she whispered. It won't kill for vengeance, but it will defend for love. He placed his hand on the interface. Then let's give it something to fight for. The ship surged. Its thrusters roared, shifting course into the very heart of the ion storm. Lightning flashed outside the hull, turning the dark into flashes of divine light. The pursuing corvette hesitated, just for a moment, its scanners likely going blind. Jonah caught the hesitation and acted. Now, the ship dove, rolled, and spat a beam of ancient plasma backward through the clouds. The hit was not fatal, but it was direct. The Alliance corvette rocked off course, veering wide. The storm masked their position as the arc ship sank lower, threading through the field. Like it had flown here before. Maybe it had. Maybe in another war, under another sky, it had danced the same death ballet, but the moment of advantage didn't last. A beam seared through the clouds behind them, grazing the ship's aft engine. Jonah felt the jolt like a punch in his teeth. Sparks rained from the ceiling. He looked over. Lira had gone pale. Blood trickled from her nose. What's happening? He shouted. I opened too much of myself to the ship, she rasped. I gave it too much. She's waking. My daughter, she's inside now. Awake and scared. Jonah stood, rushed to her, catching her before she collapsed. Her skin was burning hot, her pulse rapid. We're not giving you up, you hear me? No matter what. She grabbed his shirt, weak but focused. There's a node beneath the core. It can store her lock her consciousness into a quantum shell, but someone has to transfer it. Manually, while the ship shields itself. Then, I'll do it. Her eyes widened. You don't know how. I don't need to, he said. The ship knows me. It's trusted me this far. Let it finish. She hesitated. Then, with trembling fingers, she pressed something against his temple. A flicker of heat, a jolt of memory. For one instant, Jonah saw through her eyes a flash of a child with glowing eyes. Laughter in fields long gone. The sound of waves on a world that no longer existed. It was like being handed someone's heart in the dark. He didn't speak. He just ran down the corridor. Through a wall that opened just for him. Into the ship's central chamber, a living engine of pulsing light and bone-like structures. At the core was the node, a crystalline cradle humming with faint echoes of a voice he'd never heard but already loved. The ghost of a girl who never got to live. All right, he whispered, palms on the node. It's okay. I've got you. He closed his eyes. The ship responded. Heat surged through his body, like memory and fire being downloaded all at once. He saw her, Lyra's daughter, her thoughts like feathers brushing across his mind. She wasn't afraid. She was waiting to be saved. The light pulsed. Energy flowed. The transfer began. Above, Lira screamed. The Alliance ship locked missiles again. The Ark vessel shuddered, but it did not fall. Jonah stayed rooted, hands clenched, teeth gritted, whispering over and over, "Come on, come on, come on." And then the pulse stopped. Node turned blue dot. The light went still. He fell back, gasping, coughing smoke and memory. The ship's systems surged with new power. It was awake, fully, entirely, and it was angry. The next moment, Jonah heard the Ark ship roar. Above. Lira watched as the walls came alive with patterns that were not weapons, but, well. The ship fired one final beam, massive, bright, not destructive, but disruptive. It washed over the Alliance corvette like a tidal wave of sound and light. The enemy ship went dark. No explosion. No flame. Just silence. And drift. Ark ship had spared them, but left no doubt. She would not be taken. Not again. Asterisk. The silence after battle was always the loudest. No alarms, no engines. No voices, just the steady thrum of a living ship catching its breath. The Alliance corvette, now drifting powerless behind them, hung like a ghost in the storm-tossed sky of Talvela. No pursuit, no retaliation. Whether they feared the Ark ship or simply didn't understand what had just happened, they made no move to follow. And Jonah sat on the floor of the core chamber, slumped against the node that now glowed with a soft blue light, calm, gentle, like the beating heart of a child finally at peace. He didn't know how long he'd been there when Lira appeared. She looked different now, worn, hollowed out. But there was light in her eyes too, a stillness he hadn't seen before. She crossed the threshold slowly, barefoot, moving like a shadow finding its body again. When she saw him, her breath caught. He started to stand, but she dropped to her knees beside him before he could. And then for the first time she embraced him. No words, just warmth. Just arms. Just the trembling connection of two people who had given everything they had and somehow survived. She's safe, he whispered, voice hoarse. I think she's dreaming. Lira nodded against his shoulder. I can feel her. She's here, not lost, not gone. Just different. They stayed there like that for a while, silent as the arc ship heeled around them. Small pulses of light ran through the walls. It felt almost like a heartbeat. Jonah didn't need translation to understand. Thank you. Later they stood in the observation bay again, watching the storm roll beneath them. No pursuit lights, no chase. Just the vastness of space and the gravity of all that had passed. Where do we go now? Jonah asked. Lira turned to him. Where you want to go? He raised an eyebrow. You're letting me choose? You gave up everything for someone you didn't know, she said softly. You didn't run. You didn't ask what it would cost. That kind of soul doesn't follow orders. It creates paths. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I wasn't trying to be a hero. No, she agreed. That's why you are one. He looked away, swallowing the ache in his throat. There's a system past Talvila, uncharted, hasn't been mapped by the Alliance yet. Plenty of solar energy, no comms-net, no central government, just people trying to build something better. Lira nodded. Sounds like the right place. For her too, he added. They didn't speak of the child again, not in words. But Jonah saw it in the way Lyra's fingers sometimes traced the walls, in the way the lights flickered when she smiled. He felt it in his bones when he walked the corridors. How the air somehow carried laughter not his own. A digital ghost, yes, but not cold. Never cold. In the days that followed, they flew quiet. No signal bursts, no visible trails. Just them and the arc and the stars. And in that stillness, something began to grow, not romance, not yet, but a bond forged in something deeper than desire. They were survivors, carriers of memory, guardians of something rare and sacred. One evening, as they watched a twin moon sunrise from orbit, Jonah turned to her and asked, what would you have done if I hadn't been on the ship? She looked at him for a long time, then said, waited. Longer, hoped harder, he chuckled. That's not much of a plan. No, she agreed. But sometimes hope is all you have. And sometimes it's enough. Jonah let the silence stretch, then murmured, I never got to save my sister. She died while I was stuck filing papers for a transport permit I couldn't afford. I've hated myself ever since. Lira took his hand. You saved someone else's child instead. You gave her a second life. That's not failure. That's redemption. He looked down at their fingers, intertwined without thinking. I think she'd be proud of me. I know she would, Lira said as the arc ship soared across the edge of the system, leaving behind the warships, the screams, the pain. Jonah felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not peace. Not quite, but possibility. They had escaped more. Then a pursuit. They had escaped the lie that pain must define you forever, that grief must be carried alone. Now they carried it together. And with it, the spark of something entirely human. Not domination, not victory, but love resilient, imperfect, deeply earned love, and the belief that even in the coldest corners of the stars, humanity could still shine, not through violence or conquest, but through the simple, unbreakable choice to care. To reach out. To stay. To fight, not because of hatred, but because of hope.